We are going to be focusing on our type 9 today, who our type 9s are striving to feel peaceful. That includes internal peace as well as external peace. What's going on around me? I want to feel peaceful on the inside and on the outside. So, we're going to get into how that shows up specifically in the workshop, or not in the workshop, in the workplace. And these are things that we do talk about in our standalone workshops, as well as some of our programming. Obviously, we're able to get a little deeper. Um, so if you happen to be a team, department, organization looking to bring some sort of self-awareness, others awareness, team building, some education mixed with a little bit of entertainment, I'm going to invite you to check out our standalone workshop options over at enneagrammba.com. We're booking out for spring retreats, summer retreats, even looking into some fall events. So check those out. Would love to chat a little bit about how we can tailor something to meet your team or your team's event need. So with that, let's check out our type 9. What does it mean to be a type 9 in the workplace? How does this type show up at work? As all of these, I will say, things that we talk about today are tendencies, it's theory. Obviously, if you happen to identify as a type 9 or know a type 9, not 100% of these characteristics, these tendencies, these preferences are going to be true 100% of the time, but it will hopefully give you a starting place. You can go back to this type 9 teammate and say, hey, I heard this on a podcast. What is true for you? Or you can kind of think about yourself. What's true for me? What should I be letting other people know? So with that, let's look at our type 9. So our type 9s are striving to feel peaceful. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as the peacemaker, the peacekeeper, the mediator, the harmonizer. Our awareness to action framework that we tend to follow, their leadership style is known as the consensus builder. The type 9s tend to that kind of the thing that they neglect the most is conflict. So being at peace, striving to feel at peace, that makes sense. And it's not because they are weak that they're looking to avoid conflict. It's because that they really do value harmony, um, inclusion, everybody getting along, emotional safety, everybody feeling heard, everybody feeling seen. And so when you think about it it's like, okay, this makes sense why there might be some avoidance around conflict. In the workplace, this energy matters. It's important whether you have a type 9 on your team or you just want to kind of bring the vibe or the energy of a type 9. It is important because they bring cohesion, they bring steadiness, calmness, thoughtfulness, emotional safety to a team where everybody feels really, really heard and cared about. So, what are some ways that how this might play out in the workplace? Well, our type 9s have a desire to keep that inner and outer peace. They want to avoid the conflict, the tension, anything that might disrupt that. They want everybody to feel seen, respected, and included. So, before a decision gets made, these people want to hear from others. Hey, let's get everybody's voice to the table. Let's hear what everybody has to say about this. And then a lot of times they will put other people's priorities ahead of their own. They will kind of go with the flow. One of the top type mismatches or struggles that people might have in the very beginning of their typing journey is with a type 2. And one of the key differentiators, because there are a lot of similarities, there are a lot of overlap as we continue to talk about the type 9. There are obviously some differences. One of those key differences, if this happens to be you, is that a lot of times type 2s really like to feel needed. As somebody who is striving to feel connected, which we talked all about that type a couple of weeks ago, Um, they want to feel needed. They want to feel included. They enjoy supporting people. Whereas a nine, it's not that they don't enjoy helping or supporting, but they're more comfortable not being needed. It feels less stressful. It feels like less pressure to not feel needed. And so that is a kind of nuanced difference if that happens to be you struggling between a two or a nine, just something to kind of reflect on. In the workplace, they bring calm, supportiveness, much like the two, but again, just kind of remembering that nuance. And they tend to be really easy to work with, tend to get along with everybody. Everybody tends to enjoy working with them. They are really great mediators. They are good team stabilizers during stressful time, bringing the anxiety, bringing the stress down. They can be very, very empathetic, very patient, very calming just to be around. And they are really good at seeing all sides. And sometimes it can seem like, oh, you don't stand for anything because you don't have that line in the sand. This is right. This is wrong. This is what I think. This is the other side of it. It's like, I could see why you would think that. Maybe I don't agree, but I can see where you're coming from. And so one of their nicknames, their leadership style is known as the consensus builder because of this ability to be really inclusive, to see all sides, to build consensus, not through I'm right, you're wrong, but what do we have in common? What are our commonalities that can bring us together? Now, when those strings are overused, some of those might include avoiding necessary conflict. Sometimes it's, you can cut the tension like a knife in a room because something needs to be said, but nobody's bringing it up. That is not peaceful, right? That does not feel good and calming. But it's like, well, we're not fighting, so we must be okay. But sometimes, in order to truly get back to that peaceful state, you have to have that difficult conversation. You have to go through that conflict, and that can be really difficult, especially for our type nines. They might shove down or suppress their own needs or opinions. They may procrastinate or withdraw when they feel overwhelmed by other people's emotions, demands, needs. Again, going back to that key difference between a type 2 or a type 9, it can feel overwhelming to feel needed. And then sometimes they can kind of lose their selves and their own goals, their own pursuits, their own personal priorities for the sake of not wanting to seem too self-promotional, wanting to seem selfless, that they're very group oriented, which they are, but there may be times where you do need to toot your own horn to focus on your own priorities for the sake of being more peaceful, striving to feel more peaceful, because then maybe you're able to make more money. You're able to be more financially at peace because you're focused on your personal career path and bringing other people along, but just kind of remembering to not completely lose sight of your own goals, desires, personal priorities. How a type 9 might show up at work. Their work style tends to be very cooperative, very steady, very reliable. Sometimes they have been said to be maybe the emotional glue of a team, keeping everybody, together, that harmonizing factor. Maybe two people on the team really have a hard time getting along, or they butt heads, and that type 9 is really going to do what they can do to keep everybody engaged, keep those tensions down. They are very good in collaborative, respectful environments, but they may struggle to speak up for themselves, assert themselves in a conversation. If they're in a meeting, it might seem like they're not engaged. Some people might think, why are they even here? They're not contributing. But a type 9 is thinking, okay, I don't want to rock the boat. Tension's already high. There's already some differentiating opinions. I don't want to make things worse. I'm just going to sit back and take it in. Their leadership style, as I mentioned, the awareness to action framework refers to them as the consensus builder because they really do create inclusive, psychologically safe team environments. They encourage input from other people, to share thoughts, opinions, bring everybody to the table, which ultimately builds a lot of trust and can reduce friction. Now, the challenge here for our type 9 leaders is that they may be slow to make decisions. They might avoid tough and needed conversations, whether it is delivering some sort of bad news, whether it is, getting everybody together to kind of hash something out, whether it is giving some needed but difficult feedback to a team member or a direct report. And then I have heard other people talk about sometimes the frustration of the length of time it takes for our type 9s to make a decision because they want to hear from everybody. That can be such a great thing, and that other times it can really slow things down, and it just may not be necessary. You sometimes do have to move fast. You sometimes do have to move without hearing from everybody, without everybody necessarily even agreeing, and that can feel really uncomfortable for our type 9s. Their pet peeves are being in high conflict environments. And again, with all of these, this is kind of subjective, right? So high conflict might feel really engaging and passionate and exciting to other types. It might not feel like conflict. It might seem like, oh, we're brainstorming, we're having interesting conversations. So high conflict environments is a pet peeve. I mean, sometimes it's very clear, okay, this is high conflict. Other times it might be a little bit more subjective. So just something to think about. They do not like, I hear this from many type 9s, not to be rushed into decision making. Our 4s, our 5s, our 9s have a tendency to need a little bit more time to process things. I would say our 6s also appreciate sometimes to kind of put some thoughtfulness, some think through things, have a backup plan. Probably a type 1. No one necessarily loves to be rushed, but I see our type 3s, our type 8s, usually our type 7s, a little bit more able to have an answer on the spot, to share an opinion on the spot without necessarily overthinking it, making a move kind of on the spot. So as much as you can, when you know, hey, I'm going to ask for everybody's opinion during this meeting, or everybody's going to be expected to share something, giving the team as much of a heads up as you can is going to make people like our type 9s feel respected, seen, and a little less stress coming into that meeting, knowing, hey, okay, I've had some time to think about this. They do not like to feel ignored or bulldozed over. Again, going back to kind of the interpretation of different communication styles. We've used the example before where a 7 might be having a conversation and you're kind of jumping in and you're saying, oh, we could do that. Somebody's talking and you jump in and say, oh, I love that. And yes, we could add this to this, or what about this? And it can feel really exciting if somebody does it to you, because it feels like, oh my gosh, they're engaged, we're bantering, we're, brainstorming. Whereas for someone like a type 9, that can feel like you're being interrupted. That can feel disrespectful. That can feel being bulldozed. And so sometimes in a meeting setting, you might have to ask your type 9 teammate twice, hey, what do you think? Oh, no, nothing. Well, no, think about it. I'm gonna come back to you. And sometimes they might appreciate that being heard. They do want to be heard. It's just they don't necessarily love to be put on the spot abruptly, and they don't necessarily love to have to feel like, oh, I haven't had time to process this. I want to have some time to think about this before I am heard. I want to be heard, but I don't want to just be kind of put on the spot without having time to process. Preferences, kind of the opposite. Workplace preferences. I like a calm, respectful environment, communication style. As a type 9, I like it as much as possible when decision making can be collaborative. I like it when I feel included and appreciated. And as a type 9, it's important for me for others to also feel included and appreciated. If somebody's being ignored, if somebody's opinion wasn't considered, that also doesn't make me feel good as a type 9. And so also stability and predictability can feel calm, peaceful, right? We're not changing directions all the time. We don't have uncertainty popping up, last minute requests. For some, it might bother some of the types. For others, it's I don't mind. I can kind of go with that as a 7, maybe as a 3, even as an 8. But for our 9s, it's not because, oh, I already had a plan in place and now this plan is disrupted. And that is irking me. It's okay, these last minute requests or these last minute changes feel unstable. They feel unpredictable, and that does not feel calm, peaceful, harmonizing, right? So, kind of see some of the other types might appreciate that as well, but the reasons might be a little bit different. Okay, so with all of these, we've talked about. Got a little uh itching of the nose here if you're watching this on YouTube. Um, how to give feedback. We've talked about giving feedback, receiving feedback. So, giving feedback to a 9, you want to consider being gentle, kind, yet clear, right? Clear is kind, um, gentle. That may not necessarily be natural for many of us, but it's going to land and be received so much better if you can think that way. Don't mistake their quietness when giving feedback as agreement that they are on board with whatever it is you're saying. Um, Check in, take a minute, kind of check in. They most likely will not interrupt. They most likely won't say, well, wait a minute, I don't know that I agree with that, unless you kind of give them that space and that prompt to do so. And even then you might have to say, here's where I'm at with this. Here's what I wanted to say now. Would love to hear your thoughts. I know that you might need a minute to digest. So why don't we touch base at the end of the day? Why don't we come back to this tomorrow? And I would love to hear your feedback. So just giving them some space to process. Encourage them to share their true thoughts. And when people share their true thoughts, we have to be okay with what their true thoughts are, or they're not going to share their true thoughts anymore. And so if a type 9 is sharing openly, maybe even something that you would disagree with, we have to be very careful about either shutting it down or then putting that true thought on trial and making them defend it, because next time they're just going to think, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. So, encouraging them, supporting them, recognizing as much as possible, and appreciating, hey, we could even say, I don't know that I agree with what you're saying, but I do appreciate you sharing that with me. I really appreciate you being honest. Let me take a minute and think about this, and I'll get back to you with my thoughts. So letting them know that you appreciate it, you're not attacking that opinion, even when you might agree with or disagree with it. And then I think that this is also important for our type 2s, is that when we do disagree, it doesn't mean that we don't like each other. It doesn't mean that now we're, disconnected. It doesn't mean that we won't ever be okay again. So saying something like, I don't agree with you, or we had this issue, but we're okay, or we're gonna be okay. Just that simple reminder. And as a 9, that can feel kind of comforting. It may not feel completely peaceful and comforting, but just hearing, we're going through we're gonna have a hard conversation. We're going through a difficult time. Some sort of conflict has come up, and we will be okay. We will get through this. I still value you. Saying things like that can feel helpful to our type 9s. Now, as a type 9, receiving feedback, practice voicing your opinions even when it's uncomfortable. So if you do agree or have something to add to that, don't shut down. Don't just shut down. Don't just withdraw. Ask a follow-up question, clarify, share kind of what you're thinking. stay engaged and in that feedback, and remember that your opinion, your perspective really does matter, and the person on the receiving end probably wants to hear about it. It could probably be important to them. You most likely are important to them, they care about you. So your opinion, your thoughts, your perspective truly do matter. And then just do what you can to fight that urge to withdraw when tensions do come up. Stay in the conversation, wiggle your toes, do whatever you got to do. Maybe take a minute and say, let me think about this. Let me grab a cup of coffee, let me process this real quick. I'll be right back. Doing whatever you need to do, but stay engaged. Don't withdraw, don't shut down. All right. And with all of these, we have talked about the three different flavors of each of the types. Our type 9 also has those three instinctual bias variations. And so our preserving nines, when you overlap striving to feel at peace with the preserving energy of focusing on resources, taking care of the nest, managing time, managing energy, comfort. This is especially true. That comfort piece is really underscored here. We have a comfort focus for our preserving nines. They tend to be really practical, very steady. They might prioritize routines, what's going on at home, stability, making sure that we have enough. And so this is one of those flavors of a nine that sometimes people might wonder, am I a nine or am I a one? And so there, it might be this preserving nine showing up if you're stuck between am I a one or am I a nine? And we have our navigating nines, which our navigators tend to be focused on group dynamics, role clarity, higher understanding the hierarchy. They don't have to be in charge, but they just kind of want to understand who is. And so when we overlap the navigating with the striving to feel at peace, we get a very group oriented, very relationally aware type of person. They are looking at dynamics of a team and working to keep everybody connected, keep everybody, getting along. So it really is kind of doubling down on that harmonizing, connecting, making sure everybody feels good kind of energy that the nine has. And then the transmitting nine is probably the least textbook looking nine, where we have the transmitters who, again, tend to want to go far, fast, leave a legacy. They're a little bit more, have a little less, higher risk tolerance. There we go. Want to be seen a little bit more, which is almost the opposite of a type 9. And we're going to talk about that, the type that they neglect the most. And so this type is going to most likely be a little bit more energetic, be a little bit more engaged in the workplace, on a team and projects. They're going to bring people together through shared experiences, maybe be a little bit more charismatic. And so this might be the type 9 where you're wondering, am I a transmitting 9 or am I some type of type 3? Am I a transmitting 9? Am I a 7? I'm trying to think of some of the others that might be. I think that those would probably be some of the more look like. This might even be, I guess, as we're talking about flavors that could be mistyped, transmitting 9, potentially there could be some type 2 energy in here. Am I a transmitting 9 or am I a type 2? Also very much navigating 9. Am I a navigating 9 or am I some version of a type 2? But I think for all of these, though, that rule that I shared at the top, I don't want to say a rule, but that kind of that gut check about how you feel about being needed can be helpful. 9 versus 2 in this situation. Okay, now let's look at arrows, neglected strategies, resource points, whatever we want to call these. So the most neglected type for our type 9 is the type 3. Striving to feel outstanding feels almost the opposite of striving to feel at peace, where we have talked about calmness, stability, not rocking the boat. and not wanting necessarily to be in the limelight, not seeming too demanding, not seeming too self-promotional, which a lot of times there may be some friction, even though the type 3 may not realize it. There may be some friction with a type 9 and a type 3 because a type 9 is seeing them as too self-promotional. They talk about themselves, too self-centered, yada, yada, yada. Ironically, and maybe unfortunately for you type 9s, this is the strategy where you have the most opportunity for growth. This focus, this momentum, this forward moving energy. So you can set goals, take initiative, allow your ambition to move you forward. Allow yourself to step into the spotlight, toot your own horn for that career growth, for those maybe career opportunities. And again, you can't just say, oh, because I'm going to change the strategy, I want to be outstanding now. No, you have to figure out a way to make this story of striving to feel at peace align with some of these growth opportunities of the three. So if I were to reach these big goals, if I were to have more momentum toward in this direction, if I were to be a little bit more visible in the workplace, how could that allow me to be more at peace? What might that do? The a lot of the examples that come up is that financial, I will actually be able to earn more money. I might get more vacation time as I move up, which would feel more at peace. That financial relief would feel peaceful. So we have to figure out how to change the narrative because most of the time the narrative is the narrative and it's not going to work long time term to change. Okay, now I'm been striving to kind of feel at peace, whether consciously or unconsciously. That's kind of been my motive, and now all of a sudden I have to change it to be outstanding. No, that's not going to work long time. You got to figure out how to make these qualities align with the story that you already have. In this case, how can these things make you feel more at peace? And then sometimes when our type 9 has tapped out of their own coping mechanisms, defense strategies, they will try to use some of the coping mechanisms of their supporting strategy, which in this case is the type 6. Sometimes this is known as your stress arrow. So when a type 9 is typically calm, cool, steady, go with the flow, acceptance, a little bit more comfortable with change, in times of burnout, you might see them being a little bit more anxious, a little bit more pessimistic, a little bit more skeptical than they normally are. I think 9s to 7s tend to have, I'll trust you until you give me a reason not to trust you. But in times of stress, burnout, they might adopt this, I'll trust you once you give me a reason to trust you energy of a type 6 and some of those other stress qualities. However, there are also a lot of growth opportunities here at the point 6 where you're using your voice, you're really committed to your goals, other people, and you're speaking up when something really matters. You're standing up for your beliefs, which are strengths of the type 6. They may tend to doubt themselves, but they tend to have a lot of conviction and be much more comfortable speaking up when something doesn't seem right, when somebody's being taken advantage of, that sort of thing. And so looking at how can I channel the strengths of a 6 again to support my striving to feel at peace. All right, some things that you can do to start to move in this direction, grow as a type 9, a couple of quick experiments if you are a type 9 is to share your opinion before being asked. So, one really easy experiment thing to try within the next week is to be the first person to speak up in a meeting. Is that going to be uncomfortable? Probably. Probably. Um, but looking for ways to do that. Speak up. Don't be the last person to speak up. Look for ways. How can I be the first person or maybe the second or third person to speak up in a meeting? That forward momentum. So looking at what is one priority, what is one goal what is something that I can take action on today or this week to move in that direction rather than kind of hanging back, waiting, seeing what happens? What's something I can kind of proactively start on? And then you're not going to like it. You're not going to like it, but what are some ways that you can practice healthy conflict? It doesn't have to destroy peace. So maybe there is a conversation that you feel like, hey, I've been needing to have, but I'm also been avoiding because I'm afraid of how they're going to react. Or there is something that I don't agree with that I want to let my manager know about. Practicing speaking up, sharing that. Uh, you're probably going to deliver it. You're most likely going to deliver it in a way that is very receptive by the other person. And even if it's not, there's going to be times like that. So finding an opportunity to share something that feels like it could cause conflict, it feels uncomfortable, but knowing, hey, maybe this is something that we have been needing to address, and I can actually get this tension out of my life, get back to that peaceful point if I'm able to have this conversation with my teammate, with my manager, with my client, whatever it might be. Now, if you work with a type 9, some things to think about, um, to experiment with is to invite their input. Just because they're quiet and don't say anything, don't assume they agree. And when you're inviting that input, as we've talked about, allowing that as much time, as much heads up, as much time as they you can give them to kind of process and come up with input with their opinion to really check in, how do I feel, the better. But making sure you're asking, you're inviting that, creating safe spaces for disagreement. We already kind of talked about that. If you want people to be brutally honest with you, when people are brutally honest with you, not shutting them down, not raking them over the coals, not name calling, right? We gotta, if we're saying, hey, I want this, I want you to disagree with me, I want your honest opinion, we have to first kind of create that safe place. And then when people do, we have to treat it, that disagreement, with care and respect. And then there are so many things to appreciate about our type nines. And I think one of them is that calmness, that steady presence that they have. And that isn't always a I don't know. I'll just speak from my personal preference or my personal experience. I don't know that that's always a top leadership quality that gets talked about, especially here in the U.S. It's typically the leadership is kind of that more like assertive, direct communication, strong opinions, commanding presence, executive presence, whatever that means. Those tend to be things that we really value in leadership skills. But I think that there's also a lot of unspoken or other types of leadership qualities that maybe don't always get talked about, or successful qualities that don't always get talked about. And I think that this is one of them, having that very calming presence in a time of stress, when things are certain is such a strength, can be so incredibly influential. And nines can be incredibly powerful. I don't know that they always think of themselves as that way. But they are, because people feel very cared about. People feel very heard. And so nines are able to get things done because they're bringing other people along. So that could be something else that you appreciate, want to call out to your type 9, but looking for some of those less than kind of common leadership skills, success skills that we see in the workplace, and calling them out, recognizing our type 9s, doing so. Most likely you want to do it privately. From what I hear from our type 9s, don't put their name in the company newsletter with that. They want to get that positive feedback, but it isn't always, they don't always want to be, in the spotlight getting that. So that could also be a good question for our type 9s. How do you prefer to get positive feedback? So as we wrap up, there's a lot to recognize, to celebrate in our type 9s, that they play on a team, the role that they play on a team, that harmonizing, the grounding, the connection that they bring with everybody. And so there is a lot to appreciate about your type 9 teammate. potentially your manager, the person that you are leading. So looking for those ways to appreciate that and recognize that. Um, like I've said with all of these, this is not 100% true 100% of the time. So definitely use this as a conversation opener. We have our How to Work with Me blueprint that we will use with our workshop clients. And it's just a series of questions around how do you like to be appreciated? What stresses you out? How do you like to be approached when you are at stress? What feels supportive? How do you like to receive praise? How do you like to receive hard feedback? All kinds of different things. And whether you've been through one of our workshops or not, the Enneagram gives us some language, some ideas to start getting curious about, some planting some seeds about how we might be showing up at work as ourselves, or how we might be a more supportive teammate with somebody who is a type 9 or whatever type. But this doesn't mean that we now know who you are because you have identified as a type 9 and now we know everything about you, right? Here, we've talked about some Enneagram theory. This is a great conversation starter, pulling some things out. What feels true to you? What feels like your strengths that you can really lean more into going into a new year? Where might you be overusing those strengths and you might need to dial it back or up a little bit to be able to meet your goals, the company goals, whatever that might be. So, as always, that I've said with each of these, if you happen to be a type 9 and there's something that you want to share a specific example, something funny, something serious, a real world example, something I missed, something to add, please reach out. Let me know over at enneagrammba.com/contact. You can write a quick little note about what else we should know about working with a type 9, misconceptions. I think one of the biggest ones that I hear is that a lot of times nines get a reputation for sleepwalking through life. They have that sloth vice that you'll see in some of the Enneagram literature. And not all nines, most nines are not just sitting around tuning out life. Some are, and that might be a coping mechanism. So if you happen to be doing that, there might be some stress in your life. But nines can get a lot done, and like I said, they can be incredibly influential. So just being careful of those misconceptions with each of these types, especially for our type nines here. So with that, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me for this series. We will be back next week with some new topics, and looking forward to jumping into some, I think, more specific uses. Continuing to think about how do we apply this Enneagram theory in the real world. So looking forward to that. Please share this with a type 9 in your life or somebody who's working with a type 9 that might benefit from this. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.